Hello and welcome to The Habit Architect. My name is Michael Cups, and I appreciate everybody watching, and whether you're watching it live or whether you're watching it on replay. The guests today are fantastic. We've actually had them on the show before. They were one of the early guests of The Habit Architect, probably back in January, February of last year. And they did such a great job. We talked about weekly check-ins, and today we're going to talk about kind of a broader, longer-term view of things. And I think it's really important. But before I get to all that, do on your podcast, your favorite podcast channel, do like and favorite us, subscribe, whatever it is, forward it to your friends so they watch as well. And of course, go to timebandit.io if you want information about habit building and priority management, because we've got a lot of information there for you. So let's get on with the topic. So, a lot of times when we talk about habits, we're thinking about short range things. We talk about New Year's resolutions, or we talk about just starting a new, healthier way of living, or maybe you're looking for a job and you're trying to get some training and you're trying to do this short-term thinking. What we're going to talk about today is really longer-term things. What are those habits that make relationships successful? And we all have them, whether it's with a spouse, a husband, wife, even family members, as well as in your workplace. You may have a long-term relationship with your boss. Maybe you've worked for them for several years, or maybe you've recruited somebody with multiple companies. So these long-running relationships can be challenging, because there's a lot of elements associated with that. And that's what we're going to talk a lot about today, is what are the habits and what are the activities we can do that really help us sustain relationships over a long period of time. And I'm not going to get into the details in the introduction, so why don't we bring Russ and Danielle on, and we're going to let them talk about these long-term relationship challenges and opportunities. Good morning. How are you today?
Hey, Michael. Great to see you.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having us.
Excellent. Well, yes. Why don't we start with introductions? Danielle, why don't you start? Tell us about intentional marriages and the two of you.
Sure. My name is Danielle West, and my husband Russ here. We've been in corporate sales for 20 years or 20 to 30 years. But since we've left those fields, we've organically built a marriage ministry over the years. And it wasn't because we thought we had arrived and, we were, that we had it all together. Far from it. We've been in couples counseling for almost 22 years. We went initially reactively, and then over time, because things were working and it was really helping us, we kept going proactively. And that has really helped us. Mm-hmm. We both needed to learn the inevitable conflict that comes up in marriage. And so it was really important for us to do that work.
Yeah. And Michael, as you know, I was in software sales, enterprise software sales for 30 years, and where we got to know each other. And
absolutely.
Yeah. So in about 2012, we started doing this marriage mentoring I was doing it part-time. She was doing it full-time. I was doing nights and weekends. And it just kept growing and growing to where we're up to, almost 400 couples. And about 2 years ago, I left the software industry and been doing this full-time for the last 2 years. But we've been doing it together for 12. Since 2012.
That's amazing. Think about what you just said there. 400 couples. You've impacted how they think about their relationships, and hopefully have taught them things along the way. Because I know you've taught me. The last time you guys were on, we talked about the weekly check-in, among other things. But I distinctly remember one aspect of that, Danielle, and you said it. You said, go for a walk, so you're not facing each other, but you're walking side by side, and you're not in conflict. And I still practice that today, even not just with Catherine, but with other people. I would sometimes say, let's go for a walk, just to have that conversation differently. So I for one carried some advice from last year as well. So I'm impacting 400 couples is fantastic. So but today we're going to talk about when it gets hard, when relationships get difficult, and inevitably two people that are deciding to spend their life together, it's going to get difficult at times. Just like you said, Danielle, you started going to therapists kind of along the way, and it helps, but that's why you started this, because people do find hard times. And so let's talk about that. Conflict is a number of things, right? It builds up over time, or it can be, we think of conflict though as just a big argument, but it's really more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's tension. We tell people when someone says something we don't like or agree with, or does something we don't like or agree with, we get that what we call it flooding, where we get flooded with cortisol and adrenaline to fight, flight, or freeze. So it's just tension, that yucky feeling, that it's something that happens inside of us, our nervous system.
Yeah, yeah. And is that when people come talk to you, or are they in front of conflict, or is it because they've had a conflict?
Well, it may be because, like Russ mentioned, that flooding feeling is our
Yeah,
nervous system reacting to that tension. And we can go through, many series of, okay, he's shutting down or she's
yeah,
becoming verbally aggressive. And with that kind of tension, it it gets into a vicious cycle. For
yeah.
us, I shut down when tension
Right.
happens. Russ is more the tiger, I'm the turtle. And unfortunately, we get stuck in these vicious cycles. And so what happens for couples is you get into these cycles, and eventually they get sick and tired of being in these cycles, and they're like,
Right.
there's got to be a better way. And that's
Right.
when they show
Or
up.
they think something's wrong with them, like they're not normal because they fight too much. They think because there's tension or
Yeah.
conflict that something's wrong with their marriage. They weren't made for each other, and that's not the case at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we're kind of taught that. At least I was that you kind of just sometimes rather than making it escalate, you just kind of walk away from it because and that may or may not be the best thing depending on situationally. But I think we all do that, right? We kind of well, when that fight or flight gets in there, we flight because it's in a business setting, or maybe you're in a
Yeah.
supermarket and there's people around, things like that. But how long does that last? How I mean, it's got to be building up, right?
So part of the problem of walking away is good. The pausing when tension
Yeah.
happens, that's really
Yeah.
good. But not coming back to it, that's the danger. It's like burying radioactive waste. It's still in the land, air, and the water. And
Yeah.
over time, when
Like
it's not addressed, resentment starts to build. And you can't
yeah.
see that resentment. It's invisible, it's silent until one time, that cup of resentment has filled up,
Yeah.
and then people walk away permanently.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's no set math because everybody's different, but you've probably seen people that resentment has built over the years, probably both sides of the
Yeah.
of the relationship. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you see that, and how do you unwind that a little bit?
Yeah. So we take couples through a process of, first of all, helping them understand what they're really frustrated about. So we want them to understand their role, because what we've learned is the more intense my frustration with the tension or conflict, the more it's about me, right? Doesn't mean they don't have a role in it, right?
Right.
But the more intense it is, the more. So we learn to get our role, and then we teach them how to understand why is their spouse's perspective so important, right? So try to understand their side of it, right? Seek to
Yeah.
understand, right, instead of seek to win, and or fight to understand instead of fight to win. And so we teach them to try to understand each other, understand themselves, and then understand each other, right? And
Yeah.
then we teach them a repair process so that when there is tension or conflict, like Danielle said, in the moment when you get flooded, you don't want to try to talk because your emotional brain is taking over.
Right.
So it's good to pause and then kind of get your thoughts together. Okay, what's my role here? What am I feeling? Let me go back in and try to really understand the other person, uh, and come in a calm manner and try to address it is what. So we teach them a 7-step repair process, how to come back and have a hard conversation.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is I was listening to a comedian. I think his name is Henry Cho or something like that, and he was talking about when he goes away from a fight, he's trying to figure out how he's going to win the next argument, and that's probably not the right
That's that,
mechanism
yeah,
there.
yeah.
But
No, no.
exactly. But Danielle, you coined a phrase I heard when we did a pre-call. You said be curious, not furious, right? And I think that's kind of what you were just talking about, Russ. Is that right, Danielle? Is that the concept?
Exactly. Yeah, it's important to be more of an investigative reporter, and it's so hard when you've been triggered by what they've said or done, and it's important to take that pause so that when you do go back, that you can actually be more of an investigative reporter. Like the best phrase, if you want to take one thing away from this, is use the phrase, tell me more. Tell me more why you're frustrated. Tell me more what just happened. Tell me more from your perspective how you feel about this. And that works in marriage and in business relationships. But
Yeah.
using that phrase, tell me more, will give you an understanding of where they're coming from instead of you just assuming you know where they're coming from.
Right.
Yeah, Michael, that is one of the when someone says something we don't like or agree with, if we can learn that habit of, hey, can you tell me more about how you got to that perspective or how that makes you
Yeah.
feel? That is a game changer. Versus
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
convince them they shouldn't feel that way and that I'm right and you're wrong, right? And that's what
Right.
we usually.
Right. Well, it's that thing, Russ, you and I know, selling software for so many years. Listen more than you're speaking. You're saying just listen more, right? And
Yeah.
that's good. That's a good thing. So
Mike
what
and Michael,
happened?
real quick on the listen.
Yeah.
I heard a leadership consultant coach that works with executives last week, 2 weekends ago. He said something. He goes, "Listen like you're wrong."
Ah, yes,
Right.
that's great.
Instead of we're in the conversation and we're already, our brain's like, hey, I'm right. So I'm just thinking about how I'm going to convince them I'm right versus
Yeah.
listen like I'm wrong, try to get that information out of them. I love
Well, I
that.
tell you what, that's good advice for this whole polarization that we all feel today, and from politics to everything. That's
Absolutely.
good advice. Yeah. So we start to unwind with the be curious, and what happens in that process, or what's your framework for walking couples through that to from just that point of saying, okay, let's listen more and let's hear your perspective more. How do you guys what's the framework you use after that?
Yeah. So so what we do is we have this process called the repair framework. And so you would go to the person and say, hey, can we talk about such and such, whatever the frustration or whatever the negative event or the conflict that's happened. Say we walked away and now we're coming back and we're saying, hey, can we talk about that situation?
Okay.
And you would ask them first, hey, can you tell me I really would like to understand your perspective. Tell me your perspective. And then they're going to say things you don't like or agree with. So instead of trying to correct them, say, wow, can you tell me more? Tell me more about why you feel that way. Tell me more about how you got to that perspective. And you keep asking that. And then you want to validate their perspective or feelings, right? And here's the
Yeah.
key. You don't have to agree with someone's perspective to understand why they feel the way they do. And so let me give you a quick personal example. Early in our marriage, Danielle, because of something that happened in middle school and through high school, at school, she hates to be ignored, right? And so
Yeah.
early in our marriage, if say we went to a dinner party and we got in the car, she'd say, hey, you ignored me all night. And I'm like, what? No, I didn't. Yeah, you did. No, I didn't. So we would fight about perspective, right?
Right. Yeah.
Finally, our counselor that we were going to, he taught that it took me way too long to get this in my knucklehead. But I learned I didn't have to agree I ignored her to understand she felt ignored, and it was really painful because of
Right.
her childhood, right? So as we go through this process and we go to validate, we don't, once again, I don't have to agree with, in a business setting or whatever the setting is, I don't have to agree with their perspective to understand, oh, I see now why you feel that way. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
That validation just creates this, and then you try to work on a common solution. Right now, once you understand each other's perspective and you care about each other, but now, okay, let's come up with a joint solution. And we believe in marriage. In marriage, it happens all the time with parenting, right? You're never going to agree on parenting. You're never going to agree on how often to have sex. You're going to agree on all the financial things of what to buy them, And
Yep.
so in business, it's the same thing. Matter of fact, I thought about this when I was, and when you think about tension in the workplace that can't be fixed, right? Because we've learned that research shows that 70% of problems in marriages cannot be fixed. So they become tensions to manage, not problems to fix. And that's real hard because we're fixers and we get rewarded, in business, we get rewarded for fixing, right?
Yeah.
So I thought about, what's an example of a problem that can be fixed in business? So Michael, have you ever given, how often you've given a comp plan to a new comp plan to your reps at the beginning of the year? And they're like, was there tension? Was there ever tension when you would give that to them?
Yes, sometimes before they even opened it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I all the time years, I always, as a rep, never felt my comp plan was fair or good enough, right?
Right.
But
Right.
as the person putting the comp plan together, they always thought it was too fair. Well,
Right.
I wasn't going to convince them that it wasn't fair enough. They weren't going to convince me that it wasn't that it was great. So
Right.
that's just a tension that has to be managed. It wasn't a problem that was going to be fixed, right?
Yeah.
And so there's
Yeah.
plenty of those
Exactly
out
right. You're right.
And
Exactly
I'd
right.
like to go back to the example that Russ used about me feeling ignored.
Yeah.
I hate this wounding. It's a filter that I see through. I wish I could undo it, but it's something
Right.
that I've learned. I've become self-aware of what my woundings are. And what's been really, really key for that principle that he says, if you can still validate and not agree that you actually did it, but you can still validate their feelings. What it's done in our marriage has softened that wounding for me. It doesn't rear its ugly head as often. And so for him to set aside feeling accused, or, like in the beginning, I did. In the first early years, I did accuse him. But then now I would come to him and say, that junk I have of feeling ignored, it comes up so easily. Tonight was really hard for me. And
Yeah.
instead of him feeling attacked, he's like, oh, he
Yeah.
leans in. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Mhm.
Could I have done anything differently this evening? And see, over time, that for me has softened this
Right.
filter that I see through.
Yeah.
So that's been really powerful for us.
And that's a great point. Michael, what we see the key is in having healthy conflict or healthy tension is that both people feel valued, respected, and understood. If you can do that, that's the key to it. And then there's so much value from healthy tension or healthy conflict. I mean, in marriage, it makes, if you feel valued and respected and understood, it's going to build that emotional connection you want in marriage. But in business, collaboration is where usually the best outcomes come from, right? Not because of one person's idea. It's when you get several people in a room and you're collaborating. But when you do that, you're bringing different perspectives, which then tends to bring tension and conflict because people want their perspective to be the one everybody goes with. And so we call that, if you can do that collaboration with respect, making people feel valued and respected and understood, then usually your best outcome is going to come out of that because it's going to be a mixture of those perspectives.
Yeah. Well, it strikes me when you were talking about Wounded Danielle and Russ. I mean, we all show up to a relationship with years behind us that they weren't, that particular partner wasn't a piece of or part of, and some of that can be bad baggage, some of it could be good, and there's a lot of lessons we learn along the way. And so how do you kind of get a couple to say, let's just stop and understand that a little bit, because they may not have gone to therapy, or they may not have, they just know that their marriage is struggling right now. So how do you start unwrapping that a little bit?
Yes, I'm going to share. Maybe this is my personal opinion. If you don't get anything out of this podcast, this is the most important thing I've learned in 28 years of personal counseling and almost 23 together, right? And that's the way our emotional brain works, right? So our prefrontal cortex stores memories as pictures, right? That's the logical part of our brain, right? It stores all the memories from our childhood and our past as pictures. But the amygdala, which is our fear threat system, stores memories as emotions with no picture. So to your point, my father was an alcoholic and drug addict, and so there's a lot of bad memories there, right? And the things I can remember with pictures, that's my prefrontal cortex. But one of the things he did is he used to embarrass me really bad, right? And so if Danielle does a little bitty thing to embarrass me, it feels to me like the world's about to end because my amygdala is remembering the way my dad used to embarrass me, but there's no picture with it. So who do I blame for that horrible feeling?
The person standing in front of you, right?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So we believe that's probably the core at the root of almost all marriage issues is when we get that 10 reaction to a 2 circumstance, is our amygdala, our emotional brain is remembering something from our past, a bad feeling, and and in a millisecond, it's flooding us with that bad feeling, cortisol and adrenaline. And it's hijacking the prefrontal cortex, which is what it's designed to do when it gets flooded, the fear threat system. And so that is one thing that to me is what causes most tension and most conflict that we've seen in marriage or business.
And to add on to that, when you do have that reaction, that's why it's so important to pause, because you keep talking about if people would just have a healthy, hard conversation. But here's the problem. Our nervous systems get hijacked. And when this amygdala hijack system that Russ just talked you through, when that happens, we can either fight, flight, or freeze. And in my case, my nervous system shuts down. It just completely shuts down. And here's the thing, no words come to mind. Now, you could think, oh, well, she's just not smart enough to, communicate during some tension. Biology tells us that it goes blank. Our brain goes blank. And I'm so grateful I learned this in counseling because it gave me some understanding why I can't even put a sentence together. And it's why we say later, I literally could not think of anything. Now, for others, they may fight and they're more tiger-like and they want to verbally process and their anxiety goes up. If they're married to a turtle who's shutting down and the tiger's like, no, we need to fix this right away, their anxiety is going up the more the other partner keeps shutting down. And
Yes.
so the tiger needs to pause and it's easy for the turtle to pause, right?
Yeah.
The tiger, that's their work, is to pause in mid-sentence. Now, here's the responsibility of the turtle. The turtle's responsibility is to come back to the conversation, because it's so habitual for us to shut down and stonewall
And never come back.
I'm okay if we never talk about that again.
Right.
But that's going to really damage the relationship, whether it's in marriage or in business. And then for the tiger, their pause gets their system to calm down as well. And now we can come back. But the thing I want people to know is, yes, we want you to have hard, healthy conversations, but first be self-aware of what your nervous system is when it's in the immediate moment of tension. What is happening in your body? And then once you understand that and know, I have to go away and I'm going to process, but I'm going to promise to come back. And tigers, you're going to take a moment and pause and then come back. Then you can have that hard, healthy conversation. But pausing is a skill that needs to be practiced.
It's hard, and we need to do it, because even though I can talk like crazy when I'm flooded, I'm in my emotional brain, which means I'm not talking near as logically as I should be.
And it won't be as productive.
Right.
That is what I've learned. Is I can keep talking, but it's not gonna solve the problem. Right? So, but that part of it, I think about some of my generational things that I was taught, and roles have changed over time with a lot of the world. I mean, Danielle, how much does the generational play into this?
Well, for like my parents, baby boomers, that was the last thing you would do, is go to therapy. That meant shame. That meant you were probably getting divorced. That meant you weren't smart. And so they avoided it completely. Then my generation comes along, Gen X, and we're like, oh, we're not going to have that kind of marriage. Right. And then the millennials are like, okay, we can do this better. And then we have the Gen Zs is like, how can we make this healthy? So we're still coming off of the baby boomers, Gen X, of avoiding getting the help. And it's funny because we'll get a personal trainer for our fitness needs. We'll get a career coach for, for our business needs, and we'll get a tax accountant to help our taxes. Yet we won't invite an expert into one of the most important relationships to just give us some guidance. It's so subjective. It's so emotional. It's hard to be objective when we're going through something hard. And so I think generationally, I do applaud the millennials. They are the first generation that has said, yep, I'm in counseling. I go once a week. I'm so proud of that generation. And I had like 15 girls that were in a small group, had just graduated college, and this was 10 years ago. And we were going around for introductions, and each of them they either talked about their counseling experience or just their level of emotional intelligence. And I said at the end of all the introductions, I was like, wait, I come from this background where my parents were ashamed of counseling, where I still went, but I was still embarrassed. Like, how are you guys so open? And their collective answer was, at colleges, there's these posters all over saying, get counseling, get counseling. And I just love how that generation has invited expertise into this very emotional relationship.
And Michael, it's hilarious. We'll have a 30-year, I can't tell how many times we've worked with mentored a 30-year-old couple. And then like a few weeks later, this 60-something-year-old couple will show up and we'll say, how did you hear about us? They said, our kids made us come see you. So,
that's a good story. And they did it, though. That's a good thing. Yeah. So you said a word, two words, actually, there, Danielle, that I'm curious your perspectives on as a couple. Emotional intelligence. You mentioned that in that conversation just then. So what does that mean to people as a couple? What should emotional intelligence, how does that apply?
I'm going to give you the short answer, and I'm going to let Russ give the long answer. For me, it's self-awareness of your own emotions and the emotions of those around you.
Yeah, that's a great short answer. So, Michael, if I had I'm 61. If I could go back to my 20-something-year-old self and tell my 20-year-old self one thing, I was only allowed to tell myself one piece of advice. It would be work on your emotional intelligence. And I can't tell you how many good jobs I left in my 20s and 30s because of my lack of low emotional intelligence. I got divorced early on, and it was because of my low emotional intelligence. And Satya Nadella, I love this. Satya Nadella, the the CEO of Microsoft, a couple of years ago, he was interviewed by Inc. magazine. And he said that 2 words separate the most successful people from all other people. And it wasn't work ethic or skill set. And obviously work ethic and skill set are very important at Microsoft. He said emotional intelligence far is what separates the most successful people. And when I think about success, it's not just success in business, success in our marriage, absolutely, but also it helps us enjoy the success. How many people are successful in business, but they're miserable, right? And so it's all about, Danielle said, being able to understand and manage our emotions and manage how we interact with other people's emotions. But it's been just a game changer in my life. Because when I got divorced is when I first got into counseling and started learning about emotional intelligence. I was 34, and that was one of the biggest game changers in my life.
Yeah, it's interesting because you said something in there again that said you quit. We quit early. So we think about that. You were talking about jobs. You said people leave jobs because they get frustrated and things like that. And had they stayed there, they might have had a different circumstance. So when is the right time to quit, or how do you spot that it's time to dig in a little deeper and learn more, or is it time to leave?
No, Michael, that's a great question. And I had to put a process in place to keep me from making emotional decisions that I regretted, right? And so whether it's leaving a job or leaving a relationship, and here's the kind of process that I kind of morphed over time, people helping me figure this out, is here's the challenge. The best marriage, the best relationship, the best job is going to be 70 to 80% positive and 20 to 30% negative. The best, right? But the problem is, because of our nervous system, our amygdala, our emotional brain, our brain is wired to magnify the negative. So what we do is we take a 70-30 positive situation, whether it's a relationship or a job, and we make it feel 60-40 negative. And what do? We leave, right? When it was really this, well, why did we do that? Is our emotions, our emotional intelligence is what causes this. And so to help me, it took me way too long to do this, but I don't know, 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, after making some bad decisions, I started this process of listing the pros and cons of whatever the situation is. If it was a job, if it was, I wanted to buy a new house, what were the pros and cons of where we live versus a new one? And then we took the scenario to what we call wise counsel. And so it's 2, 3, 4 people that you really trust, that you're going to be honest with about, here are the pros and cons. You're not going to try to convince them what you want. You're going to say, here are the pros and cons. Help me make the least emotional, most logical decision. And it's got to be someone who's objective, that you can trust, that's going to be honest with you. And we've had that put in place for any big decision we make. Like when I left my job career to do this 2 years ago, we did that. I mean, we even gave them our finances and just everything. And but if all of a sudden the job really is 80-20 negative, it's 80 negative and 20 positive, or really the relationship is that, then, that's when you might be thinking about leaving. But I've learned, and what I've worked with people we work with and myself, I made way too many bad emotional decisions because, I felt like it was a lot worse than it really was.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting concept when you say that most relationships are 70%. Let's just use those words: 70% good and 30% difficult, if that's the right word.
I'm saying the best ones are not most of them. The best ones.
But even then, think about the things that we walk away from because it's not perfect, right? It's not 99% good, exactly. and that ability to kind of deal with a little uncomfortable feeling. If we all think back to our times, some of the best times I've ever had in my life, things weren't perfect, right? In fact, they might have been falling around, and we had a good time through it. And so, that's an interesting revelation. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I think social media in particular is a villain of perfect, right? I see it in my kids. They saw something on TikTok, so we got to go do that exact same thing because that's what perfect looks like. And that's got to be a challenge for younger generations as well as older, I think.
And what I see is that there's the honeymoon phase. And then as soon as things require some work, it's like, okay, let me go on to the next one, because that it should just stay easy. And part of the problem is deep relationships take time.
Right.
And if you're leaving, if you go through that honeymoon phase and then you hit the work phase, you're never going to have a meaningful relationship, because you're always leaving. And I think part of it is social media, and part of it is the Disney culture of, well, it works out great in the movies. He just knows what to say. She knows what to do. And how come we don't? And what happens, I think subconsciously, I don't think we go into our relationships like this, but I really want Russ to read my mind. I mean, you should just know.
Yeah.
And I've told
Yep.
you, or it could the other way around. I've told you so many times, you should just do it. And so we get stuck there. And part of the work is we have to be more vulnerable in our relationships if we want to make them work. And understanding that this next generation, where everything's easy and there's always a swipe to the next one, is, do you want somebody swiping you away because you weren't easy? Like, you're a human being too. You're going to make mistakes. Let's choose people that are willing to do the work.
Yeah.
And Michael, this is such a big one. If you give me just a second on this,
Absolutely.
This one to me is gigantic. So the challenge is, we will not, most people say, I want to be better versions of myself. Well, it's hard to do that if we're not growing, and growth takes working through hard things, hard relationships, hard conversations, right? And I'm going to share a neat story. I didn't think about this till really just popped in my head. I've got a friend, he's 80 years old now, and he's been a CEO of 5 companies that were over 500 million, right? And the last one, it was a $2.5 billion company. And I asked him, this was 20 years ago. I asked him, I said, hey, if you had one thing, and I'm sure you're going to tell me it's a bunch of things, but if there one thing that's made you so successful, and this is a guy that has terrific ADD, way before everybody knew what ADD was. He barely got through college because of it, but here he had this unbelievable career. I said, what made you so successful? He goes, oh, it's easy. It was one thing. I'm like, oh, I couldn't wait. I got my pen.
Yeah.
And he goes, I love problems. I can't wait to wake up every morning with an employee problem or a customer problem. And I just threw my pen down. I'm like, oh, I hate problems. And he goes, Russ, I know that then I'm going to be able to build a customer for life or an employee for life by the way I take care of their problem. And then as I was driving home from that lunch, I was thinking to myself, and you know what I realized? My best customer relationships were the ones I'd been through some really hard thing, right? Where there was some real hard issue. And because of how we worked through that issue together, built this incredible bond where you do business for 20 years after that. And then I think about my best relationship in my life, this lady right here.
Yeah.
There's a saying that when two people get married, they both show up with a U-Haul full of baggage that we subconsciously put on each other. Danielle and I had tractor trailers full of baggage when we got married, right?
But Russ had that like double.
I had the double tractor, right?
The ones you don't like to pass.
Right. So we had to work through a lot of tension and a lot of conflict to unpack all that baggage. But here it is 21 years later. And I mean, I'll get emotional. Talk about this relationship. We never would have had that relationship if it was easy.
Same.
Yeah.
It was working through the hard things that builds the respect and a bond that you can't build unless you go through hard things.
Yeah. So, but you said something in there that, and I think Daniel said, you got to be a little bit vulnerable. You have to embrace that, right? That's really hard to do. It's really hard.
And if anyone's read the Brene Brown work, vulnerability feels weak. We're never going to get to a place where like, oh, I feel so good about being vulnerable. I'm going to go in there and be vulnerable in my conversation. It doesn't work that way. It's not going to feel good. But here's the thing. It will feel vulnerable and weak to us. But what he receives, or what the other person on the other side of the table receives, is courage
and strength.
Courage and strength. And so being vulnerable is a powerful antidote to, oh, I'm nervous, or I'm just going to keep it to myself, and the resentment builds. But that vulnerability is key to a relationship if you want to be able to lean in.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it is that feeling of you're going to lose something if you do it that way, right? And it's tough. It's tough, and I think it's even tougher.
It does feel risky.
Well, Michael, to that point, why it's so tough is because all of us at some core level, we've learned at some core level have this what we call wound of inadequacy or insecurity. So
Yeah.
that causes us to avoid vulnerability because we don't want to feel insecure or inadequate. And that's also why we have to win the perspective in the collaboration room, or we have to win with our teammates at work, or we have to win the perspective with our spouse. It's because we have to feel like we're adequate, we're capable, we're secure. So vulnerability does the opposite. But the more we're vulnerable, what's cool with our nervous system is the more we're vulnerable, and all of a sudden it's received as strength, then it teaches our nervous system it's okay to be vulnerable. But see, we have to get in there and do it first before we can retrain it. You can't just tell yourself that it's going to be okay. You have to learn it over time.
It's
you have to
practice, for sure.
experience it. And I think the problem solving answer is brilliant because especially now, I think our kids need to learn how to solve problems. And we've unfortunately, because you guys are my age as well, we tended to take care of things for our kids because we wanted them to be happy. We wanted them to have more than we did, all that stuff.
Yep.
But problem solving is one of those skills that in the AI world is going to change the way people live and work, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you have to want that problem, because if AI can solve it, we're not there yet. The problems that humans can solve are really interesting, and that ties back into these interpersonal relationships, whether it's work or not. I was going to ask you a bit about how this all applies to work, but you guys covered it throughout. I think it's the same thing. It's just different stakes, right?
And Michael, here you just made me think. Here's another thing. Remember, problem solving needs us to be in our prefrontal cortex. That's the logical part of our brain. So when we are in the emotional part of our brain, we're not going to be good at problem solving, because we're going to look. We're blocking our logical part of our brain. So that's why emotional intelligence. Another reason why I think Satya Nadella said emotional intelligence is so important is because he knows that we're going to be better problem solvers the higher our emotional intelligence.
Yeah, well, I could talk to you guys all day, but I just noticed the time we're getting into our limit. But can I just ask you a question about tactically how intentional marriages works? I mean, it sounds like you got workshops. Danielle, you mentioned a small group. I mean, tell us a little bit about the organization.
So it's primarily for intentional marriages is couples meeting with us, and the differentiator for us is that we are a husband and wife couple meeting with another couple. So they're getting the husband and wife perspective. Along with that work, we're also doing free communication workshops. So we're hosting a lunch where we invite people to come in, and for an hour, we give them, our communication cycle, how it goes wrong and how it can go right. We do that for an hour and then do 30 minutes of Q&A.
Okay.
We also have had a marriage retreat where we do from Friday night to Sunday, where we bring in couples and do more of a deep dive, where we're doing that communication cycle for an hour. We're taking them through 10 hours of that.
And while we have a lot of local people, we do Zoom. We've worked with a couple in British Columbia and Colorado. We're based in Georgia, Florida, but also on the digital side, we've got an app. We're starting a podcast. We're writing a book. So lots of ways to get people that can't meet with us, two on two or one-on-one.
Yeah, tell me about the app. What is the app? Is it the tools you guys use? What's on there?
It is. We have our. I built a course on basically all the tools and principles that we just shared with you in great depth. And so you have access to that on the app. You have, let's say you're so tired of what should we do this weekend? Well, I don't know where do you want to go? Well, I don't know, where do you want to go? And we have it where you can put in your town, your budget, and your desire of what you want to do, and it'll spit out local ideas for you within your budget. And then, okay, great, you've got the date night set up, but we still talk about the kids and life responsibilities at dinner, help us out here. So we have conversation starters in there, and just to break up the pattern. And then we have a community in there where if you're local, we meet up with you once a month. Russ does breakfast with the men. I do lunch with the ladies. And then we have a monthly Q&A, a live Q&A where couples can come on and ask us any question. It's actually one of our favorite things to do, our Q&As. And then they get to hear from other couples and learn. So it's we have a lot of other ideas that are coming with the app, but right now it's not, here's the deal. I know this is a little bit frustrating, but the app is not in the App Store.
Yep.
So that's
Yep.
why they go to our website, and you can click on the app there. It's
Yep.
more of a link. But
And
yeah, we're a little nonprofit.
and
We're
it's
still
scrolling.
working
It's
on
scrolling by right now too. So, but we'll put it in the chats of all the podcast replays as well. I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to cut you off, Danielle.
No, we're a little nonprofit. We're still working up to join the App Store.
And Mike,
Yeah.
one other key delineate: we're not counselors, licensed counselors, and that's intentional.
Yep.
We're marriage mentors, right? So
Yep.
we wanted to make that clear as well. And we
Absolutely.
often refer people that we work with. We'll find out their trauma or different things, and we'll refer them out to counselors. So
Yeah.
we refer a lot of business to counselors, but we're mentors.
And as
And that's
mentors,
great.
we're sharing, unlike counselors, and some counselors do, but we share a lot of our mistakes. And so they're hearing where we struggle,
Right.
and so we're very personal with our couples that we work with.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know if you're going to have that in the book. You just made me think of that. Whenever we tell stories of success. Maybe we ought to start telling stories of where it went wrong. Because
We're
that's
going to have a lot of
that's where we learn.
stories where it went wrong.
Yeah, perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that's fantastic. Tell people how to find intentional marriages.
Well, you can find us on the web at intentionalmarriages.net.
Yep.
And from there, you can find the app. You can visit us on
Okay.
YouTube. We're going to be doing a video podcast, so you'll be able to watch that on YouTube, Instagram, and we have
excellent.
a weekly newsletter. You're welcome. If you join the website, you'll be able to join our newsletter that we send out every week.
That's what I wanted to get to the website, and you can find all the
Use
resources.
the website to find everything.
Yeah, exactly. So before we leave, I ask every guest, and I want two different answers. I guess it could be the same answer, but what is one habit, daily habit, weekly habit that you guys have that is non-negotiable?
You go first.
So I struggle with depression, and it can be really intense. And so I've learned that I need to have an intense exercise to counterbalance that.
Nice.
And so in 2011 started doing CrossFit, and I am addicted, and I'm 59, almost to be 60. And I know people go, oh, CrossFit, but I have been really careful, and it's a place that I can go every day and have fun with a community of people. And it is so, I know it's hard to believe, but it's so restoring for me. And that's my daily habit.
That's absolutely, that's great. Yeah. How about
And
you, Russ?
my Michael, is my early morning time. It's my prayer time, and then it's my exercise time. And what it does is it sets my mindset for the day, and it sets my nervous system for the day.
Yeah.
It just gets me prepared. Great. And that is, when I don't do that, it's amazing how different my day is.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel the same way, and that's one of mine now. I walk every day. I walk.
Yeah,
a
me
lot.
too. Mine's walk exactly.
Yes. Yeah, but now I've started an intense workout 3 times a week. Now, so I get what you're talking about. I love to hate it. I think is where I am.
Exactly.
Well, it's so great to see you guys again, and thank you so much for what you're doing. You're giving back, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And people need it. Couples need it. We need it in our daily lives, how we work with people. So fantastic work. Thank you both for doing that.
Michael, thank you for having us on here. It's always an honor and blessing to see you and be on the podcast. We love what you're doing for the habit.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us all. And next week, I think we do have a special guest that had an accident at 12, and she changed her life, and she's going to talk about resiliency. So do tune in for that. Russ and Danielle, thank you so much. And everybody, take care.
Thanks so much, Michael. Take care, everyone.